All right, it's nighttime at the beach.
We're back.
We're back here in our 8-bit glory.
Look at that.
There you go.
It'll be daytime in a moment.
No Tai Chi people this week.
Yeah, it's
so
disappointing.
You don't need to do that. What have we got?
I liked it. They added to the general ambience of being at the beach.
Very nice day though, like lovely easterly wind. So if it's a bit windy, that's why. But the sea looks excellent. Like it's nice and flat.
Do you know what we need first off?
What?
Right off the bat, this is what everyone will want to know. There's an update on Karis's business.
Oh, I haven't really done anything.
Oh no!
In the last few days, I've been busy actually working on Avalon.
Oh, that's a shame.
But we won't. I'll save that though because that's not fully cooked yet to take it at the end. So, but it's
nice little teaser though.
Yeah, like look, I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
I shared it with a few people and I'm getting good feedback on it. So I think it'll go well when the moment comes.
Yes.
But yeah, like we were away camping this weekend, so we didn't really have time to be doing anything with on the computer. But it was good. We met a lot of horses.
Well, that's good.
It's like a horse. We were camping in the paddock of like a horse rehabilitation place, which is a bit odd. Yeah.
Interesting.
There you go. Some nice construction noises.
That's all right. It's a lo-fi podcast.
Exactly. No, it's good. Like I think they had about like 9 or 10 horses that they take in. I don't think they move them on at some point. You go and feed them.
Yeah.
You know, she had a bit of a wander around on a horse. Kids loved it. It's great. We were up, went out to Caversham, saw all the animals.
Beautiful.
Actually saw a wombat for the first time in quite a while in Caversham. But it was it's very rare. I feel that you actually see a wombat.
Yeah, I can't
around. They tend
think
to be
of the last time I've seen
just
one.
hidden and under a burrow most of the time. So that was cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
You know, we touched a koala. Like got our photos taken with the koalas.
Very
That's
good.
Nice. Mikey fed a sheep, a lamb from a bottle, milked a cow.
Oh.
It was all very rural.
I like it.
Yeah, it was good. He was trying to get into. They wanted some people to try out the bull whip, to crack the whip. He wanted to do that, but he wasn't allowed. He's too young.
Too young for that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the future of work, right? You've got a business, but you've got time to go rural on the weekend.
Oh, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. One day.
You know, speaking of farm animals, though, this is. I started watching Clarkson's Farm. Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard of it. I've not seen it.
I've not watched it. Apparently, it's been around since like 2019. So I finally got into it, and it got me thinking about AI. Believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Like I was thinking about it. Yeah, because so the premise of this show, right, is this is Jeremy Clarkson, formerly of like Top Gear and Grand Tour, and he's decided, do you know what? I'm going to go out and buy 10,000 acres in the Cotswolds, and I'm going to start farming. But of course, this is a guy that has no idea how to farm. Mm-hmm. So, as you'd expect, everything that can go wrong kind of goes wrong. And it's hilarious, right? I'm only one episode into it, so I can't give any spoilers here.
It
whatsoever.
might not be hilarious. It might be crap.
It might actually just end up being terrible. Yeah. But the first episode, hilarious.
Yeah, okay.
But it got me thinking about this, right? Because there's a kind of a parallel here for like the mechanization of farming, and like what the impact was of that, and what it led to, the second, third order effects, and how AI might play out the same way. And so I did like a little bit of research. And
is this a new thing where you're going to have a little bit of research?
No,
I like it.
Well,
somebody
maybe.
needs to.
To be fair, I'm just going to do this anyway because I tend to do it anyway, and now I've got an excuse to share it with you. Normally I'd share it with you over coffee, and today I'm sharing it with you over coffee, but we're also recording a podcast.
True.
So what I discovered, right, is before agriculture was mechanized in the US, you had like 10 farm workers were needed to feed one person in a city.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, post-mechanization, so closer to today, one farmer's output can feed more than 100 people in a city. So, to add some context to this, mainly I'm talking about, the advent of the tractor, and then you've got all of this other equipment that, frankly, I don't know what it is, what it does. I'm every bit as clueless as Jeremy Clarkson in this, so it was kind of, a learning experience for me. But you would have, prior to the tractor, you would have maybe, 1 to 2 people guiding, somewhere between 4 and 8 oxen, working around 10 hours to plow a single acre in a day, right? And then after the tractor was introduced, you've got a single person with a tractor, and now they could plow 40 acres in just a day. So you've gotten like this huge, like 40-fold increase in like farm productivity. And then what that's done is it's released like all of this workforce into other sectors of the economy, and you've had this like great migration that's occurred as well from these kind of rural farms into the cities for people looking for work, and that's spurned the Industrial Revolution as well, because now you've got this available labour force, and then you know, people started to earn more. We talked about Ford's assembly line last week as well, and yeah, there's these interesting second, third order effects, and it got me thinking about like how, you know, this kind of post-AI transition might look, and whether it might have like a similar impact.
I mean, it makes you wonder. Like, let's introduce the podcast, and then I'll say something.
Oh yeah, let's do that. We keep forgetting to do that.
This is the good stuff.
It's episode 5.
Episode 5. Yeah, we're almost at our allotted 6 minimum before you're committed to the thing. So
is it 6?
As I said, that's how I think Tim Ferriss used to talk about it when he was starting a new podcast. He said, like, you got to get like at least 6 in.
Yeah.
You know, you got to put a good chunk in there before you realise that you've actually got, you know, some consistency, and it's going to keep going.
Oh,
you can do it for 6, you can do it for 100. And it's like, all right, well, this is feeling pretty good at the moment. What was I going to say? Yeah, so it's interesting to think that like maybe the migration and the geographical consequences of moving everybody from farmland to the cities are more obvious in that space, because you just literally don't need people.
Yeah.
At the farms to get the same work. But I wonder if you'd see like a similar shift or not, or in reverse, or
the reverse,
like a different,
maybe,
or like a different, more like global type migration when you start to destroy a lot of knowledge work. But and I feel like maybe the intro or the early signs of this would be like early COVID. I remember Balaji having a take on this, where he said like, oh, it's interesting, like we've suddenly migrated to a world where we're now accepting people working from home, which means if they're going to work from home, they could work from
anywhere.
You know, 100,000 miles away. Like, what does it matter? Like, it doesn't really matter where they are anymore, as long as they're up in the right time zone. Then, you know, you could be anywhere. And so, what are we going to see pull out from that? I wonder if like AI would, like that into like disintermediation would sort of advance that trend or not. I know my general feeling about remote work, having done it for what feels like absolutely fucking forever, is I just don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be alone all day. It's just the worst.
Yeah.
I think particularly there's something about being a man, and like this is like a tangent from the start, isn't it?
I mean, the whole thing is a tangent.
I was watching there's a female comedian the other day. It was like on a YouTube short, came up, and she said, you know, it's interesting like how men make friends, and you meet a guy at like age 8, and you're like, all right, you'll do. Like, and that guy's just your friend forever, or you know, like you sit next to somebody at work for a few years, and like you go, all right, now we've got a second friend now. Like, and I was like, this is a little bit true, which is that you just, you know, I used to get a lot of my social battery filled from just like being at work and being around people. You know, I'm quite happy to be social with everybody that's there. You know, I'm not like, it's nice. I enjoy being around people. And I realized that when I was like alone at home, I was just like, it's just not good for
That's
me.
the thing.
I don't necessarily want it.
There's remote, and then there's being at home. And I think maybe there's a subtle distinction there as well. Yeah, one of the things that I quite enjoy about being remote is being around other people, even if they're not necessarily working with you. So there's maybe like the development of like working communities, perhaps, which I think might be quite useful. It's like you've got a space to go to where everyone's working toward their own mission. It feels like everyone is similarly aligned in that respect, but they're all working on completely different things. You're not necessarily in an office. It's just community-driven work at that point. So I wonder if there's something to that. But yeah, I mean, the kind of the moral of the original story was, I was just thinking about like the proportion of like the agricultural workforce, like pre and post the advent of that kind of mechanization process, and you had, you know, like that workforce fell from like 90% to under like 2% in a pretty short period of time. And I just wonder if we're going to see something similar in like a lot of knowledge work.
I mean, I don't see, like, because I feel like one of the more surprising things that you would hear is you start to hear of some of the cost savings that you could have moving to a more like AI native, human at the edge sort of business model. And it'd be like, yeah, you know, you might save like 90% of the cost of the operation. And it sounds absolutely nuts. But then this is like, you know, you just said there was a 40x change in productive output by introducing machines. And like, again, you know, machines can just work in a different timeline, like a different scale, like a different set of inputs and outputs. They don't sleep. They're just cheaper in general. Like, I don't see why putting like intelligence into machines makes it any less of a big impact. If anything, it sounds like it should be more impactful, just because, you know, the main thing we've ever had to get anything done better is just tons of intelligence, right? It's the same thing we throw at all the problems.
Yeah.
So.
I think what I found most interesting about watching this, though, is that it's Jeremy Clarkson. So it's like you've literally put an idiot in a tractor. I say that in a loving way. Yeah. He would say that about himself, to be fair, but you've put an idiot in a tractor and he's still managed to plough the field. Now, he's not done it as effectively as like someone with a lot of experience in the tractor, but he's still been able to do it. And so there's like also this like quite interesting like democratization narrative here as well, where it's just like as the technology continues to improve and more people have access to that technology to do new and wonderful things with it that we previously hadn't even considered. And there's this like big accelerating effect here as well. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So that was fun.
I think that's true. Sorry, I'm just taking a jumper off. So. Yeah, like that's a good parallel, isn't it? Really, like I can see that.
There's also the second order effects that I think is most interesting about this as well. Like you had urbanization occurred because of it, and my thinking is like, oh, do we need? Oh, that's good.
Is he
solid.
All right, there we go. So just drilling a hole.
Well, that's what happens.
Cutting a hole in the floor.
That's what happens in a lo-fi podcast.
All right, we shut the van door. Easy.
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry, I had no idea what
urbanization.
Urbanization, yeah, solid.
I wonder if we get the inverse of that as well to some degree, where more people just go, do you know what, I don't need to be in the big city, because you come to the big city for job opportunities. The job opportunities don't exist in the big city anymore, so what is the purpose, what is the role of the city?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the topic of a whole other podcast, but it did get me thinking.
Well, I reckon we can dovetail this into this week's topic.
Yeah.
So a bit of background to the audience of all of you, both of you,
yes.
whoever's out there at the moment, would be that we don't necessarily prepare any of this stuff. Like, the idea is we'll just pick a rough subject and then just go with it.
Yeah.
So yesterday we said, Lara, what should we talk about? And it just so happened that yesterday morning I'd been talking to a mate of mine. We were talking about the podcast and about AI in general, and we talked about like tooling and future developments and the importance of models. And I thought, you know what? I like the name Billy Big Models.
Yes.
for a podcast title, so let's go with that.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, well let's do an episode really about like, well, how does this stuff develop, and like what do we need as the updates? I think one thing I might have said on the podcast a couple of times is that I personally don't think we need any major developments in models to get going from here.
Yeah.
Like I
define
think,
what you mean by get going from here.
All right, so a broad thesis that we have is that you can save, like, there's going to be a big impact on products. This is kind of distracting, this guy doing this. But anyway, we'll keep going with it. Sorry to anybody listening. So the broad thesis is there's a huge opportunity for productivity improvements through the use of AI. And we think it will play out by businesses effectively adopting the tools, redeveloping their business processes to be human at the edge, and therefore dropping the cost base of their business, which gives them pricing power, so they can increase their market share, and then over time more competition comes in, drops the prices back down. That's the value trap. See episode 2. And I think the question is, like, do we need some sort of bigger model, a Billy Big model, to come along and allow us to do that? Or do we have all the pieces in place to do that right now?
And by that you mean some sort of like AGI?
Can I get, do we need an AGI?
Artificial General Intelligence?
Yep. In order to get, like, say, a 90% cost reduction inside a business. And my view is no, I don't even think we needed the current level of frontier models that we have right now. Like, I feel like we were probably there more or less with, like, Llama 3.
Yeah.
Which would have been like an open source, not even full frontier model about 9 months ago. Is it 9 months?
Yeah, probably.
12 months, so maybe in that sort of range, maybe 12 months ago for the Llama. And which is nuts.
Yeah. Which is probably quite a different view than most people have on this stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess, like, maybe to just like think about this thematically for what we want to get through today. So let's explore this in like more detail. So do we need bigger, better models to achieve like a 90% cost reduction inside the enterprise? That's nice framing, actually. I like that because it's like got a tangible, like attributable level that we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And then, like, what are the problems that emerge here that like this solves for us? Yeah. And then how do you actually go about solving them? Yeah. So, like,
just one more thing as well. I think maybe that we could get into first, because like what we're sort of saying there is, everyone else is there wrong, so we think it's this, and so it might be worth like just covering, well, why do we think everyone is wrong here? Because it is a bit of an extraordinary claim in a way to just come along and say like, oh yeah, so everybody keeps talking about like AI agents and general intelligence and bigger models and everything that we see like OpenAI doing, particularly a lot of their fundraising was around how do we get more GPUs, how do we build bigger models, and, like, particularly everything prior to like DeepSeek coming out. Like, that was like the prevailing narrative. It was all about size, and it was all about big companies with access to data. And maybe there's a quick version of like, well, why do we believe that's wrong?
Well, I could probably like frame this personally, I guess, because I was probably a bit slower to get to this point of view than you were. And I'd say, like, from my perspective, a lot of my reasoning was baked into this, like, I guess, prior experience just only at the application layer, working with like Claude and, using writing tools like Lex and ChatGPT and like most people, right? Like that, we operate at a like an application layer to help us do the things that we're presently trying to do in our day-to-day. And so maybe like to just establish the logic here, there's maybe a bit of framing work that we could do. So I think there's like two ways we can view this, or two ways that most people will try to view this, and you might sit in one or either camp. And the first is it's like this augmentation versus agentic framework. And augmentation is what I've just described. It's using these AI tools to complete like aspects of your existing job today. And then that gives you some kind of speed and efficiency gain in doing the thing that you previously had to do a lot more manually. And I would say that's where a lot of people are right now. And that's where a lot of the focus is. And that's maybe where this discussion around like model improvement comes from, because you do seem to be able to get better outputs, better artifacts based on the text input that you're putting into these models. And I guess like the thing that we're talking about is this like agentic paradigm, which is really like, how do we rewire the business onto an AI native standard? And that just means taking existing business processes, deconstructing them into their like component parts, getting back to first principles, and then looking at ways of applying, some of this technology like knowledge graphs, language models, agents, to achieve these outcomes autonomously. And I think, like, I would then maybe describe this another way as maybe just there's an assist versus like an automate framing to this question. And certainly from my perspective, I sat more in that augmentation paradigm initially. And I think obviously us working with Stackwork over the last 7 months as well, and then really seeing what's possible for me opened up my eyes to this more like, agentic way of rewiring the enterprise. And now I'm like, oh, we have everything that we need to do this.
Yeah,
we don't need any kind of AGI.
I think one thing I would add to that is I do think some of the, because there's also a lot of discussion brought in the milieu, like I don't know, I guess on Twitter, about like agents being like the big thing, which I also think is a little misdirected in the same way that big models, like Billy Big Models was. Yeah. Which is, I need a snappy little thing to say for agents to make them sound bad. But I think like the idea of the agent is almost like I create this AI agent and I slip it in where there was a human. So I have my agent that's a sales rep, and I have my agent that does the job of, I don't know, like receptionist. Like I can't think of good examples off the top of my head. And I think again, it's still got the wrong container.
I agree.
Like I think it's the wrong sized container for the AGI. I think it's going to be more like there's agents play a part in it, but they're part of a broader system where the agents I think will be a lot smaller than a job role. So our job role could be like 20 to 50 agents, and you're not like hiring them instead of people, sort of thing. I think that's slightly the wrong framing. And I think like the AI components of your business are both smaller and bigger than the human component, which is that the smaller component is that your one human role might be 50 to 100 agents, and then but also your entire business will operate a bit like an AI as well. There'll be like different frameworks and processes that run the thing as though you aren't required anymore. And then you almost sit alongside it as opposed to in the business, running it in that sort of human at the edge model. Even you as the owner of the business would be, you supply the capital, you supply the goals for the business and potentially the strategy, but not necessarily any of the execution. And a lot of that is AIs of different sorts. So I do feel like our business is the right container for all of this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, I mean, that's kind of what I was suggesting with the task decomposition, right? It's like we think about a task that we have now and it's really just a job function. And then the next layer down is like, okay, there's like this subtask that exists that I have to do within my job function. And then that might exist within a process that interoperates across a number of job functions within the enterprise. And I guess what we're saying is like, no, you need to go a few levels deeper and you take every one of those tasks and you decompose it down into its subatomic form, and then that's where the agent plays.
Yes, I think that's correct. And then, so I guess then the question would be, if we're saying we don't need Billy Big Models to achieve this, like, well, how do we achieve it? Or like, what is it that makes us think that it's not necessarily about some super intelligence? And like, it's pretty worth saying that like, if somebody creates a model that is super intelligent, it just makes the application of all these things way easier. The point is more that you don't need it to get any of these benefits. So these aren't benefits that are downstream of somebody spending, $400 billion on GPUs. These are benefits that we're talking about that are achievable now based on technologies that already exist, and potentially even just doing them with open source stacks that you can control yourself and run on your own hardware. And so that's quite a big difference. And the point of it is that any of these specific agents don't have to be super intelligent to automate your job. Like the big unlock is the task decomposition, right? It's in the process work. Like process improvement is about to get a lot cooler than it has been for the last sort of 10 years. But I think, as you said, like it's always struggled in the service sector. It was always good in manufacturing because of the high transactions and throughputs and regularity of the stuff. But it just didn't make as much sense in the service center because of the variability and the people involved, and like you had a lot more person-driven tasks. And I think what you're going to see is that if you take somebody's entire job and you put an AI at it and you try and program that AI in one go to do that job, it's going to really struggle because there's too much context, there's too many different things going on. Whereas if you could enumerate,
Yeah.
just a kick back to last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can enumerate the 100 different parts of that person's job, then to create an agent for any one of those bits is way simpler. It's like exponentially simpler to do it for like that one tiny task, and you will get much better outputs for that one task. And then the question is like, how do you then start to put all of those things together and then choose which particular agent or which particular task you're going to do next? And a lot of that is just quite normal software work, right? We have, effectively we have like processes, we have selection criteria for who's going to do the next bit of the job, and then we need to spin up that particular agent at that time to do that job and give us an output. So a lot of that really comes down to, again, understanding the process, understanding what you need as an output, having those agents programmed ahead of time to do that one specific task, and then having an ability to chain them all together. And so there's a few like enabling technologies for all of this that we kind of talk about on and off as we go. And one would be the ability to build it into a workflow tool. Like having something that can, where you can define the process and the workflow that includes both human interaction, agents, and just general compute logic is going to be key here. Like that's really like how your processes will live in this human at the edge business, I would say. The next bit I think is like the thing that unlocks all of this was the ability to get structured outputs out of LLMs. So I think this is the bit that I feel is just weirdly glossed over in, like, I think this is the real magic of LLMs versus like obviously the sizzle to the sausage. The sizzle is always the like, my God, I can talk to this thing and it sounds like a human. But I think the sausage is like, oh wow, I can talk to this thing as a human and it can turn it into computer.
Yeah.
And it's that ability for the thing to translate back into sets of structured outputs that can fit into just bog standard computer programs. Because we've got this, the ability to perform a task as a human might cost you 100. To perform it with an LLM might cost you 10. And to perform it inside silicon as a straight computer program would cost you 1. You know, you always want to be driving down the cost of all of these tasks. So if you can take an intent from like a human expression or natural language and then turn that into a structured output that could kick off one of, you know, like 10,000 different subroutines that are just written inside a computer program, then you drop your cost massively. And I think that's what a lot of software has always been doing. It's just lots of fancy UIs and screens and GUIs to try and turn a person into a robot that can give the correct inputs into a machine so that the rest of the process can run unencumbered. Now, but all of those particular processes tend to be kind of defined and done at a level that they fit inside the software. So if I'm selling the SaaS software for everybody in the world, like it has to be good enough for everyone in the world, so it becomes not quite what you're after and not specific enough for your use case. So yeah, so I guess where we're going, so Billy Big models. So in terms of like why can we do this now? I think it really is that like we have the ability to turn intent into structured language. We already have computer programs. We already have access to data. We already have ways of retrieving data when required to build better context. We have ways of building structured workflows and business processes. The bit that was missing was the ability to interface with the real world, and the real world comes in human language, in fuzzy examples, and I think that's the real real sausage. The real sausage.
Yeah,
it's also a good podcast.
But I think that is, save that one. We'll bank that one for a future episode. What I would add here is just to circle back to the framing aspect of the conversation, is that framing becomes super important here because for a lot of people they are looking at AI generally, let's say agents specifically, as another tool to bolt into their existing processes. And I think this is where you kind of alluded to this earlier about it's almost like a form of tool creep, tool proliferation inside the enterprise, where you go, yeah, we've got this deterministic software to help us manage a part of a process. And what we're going to do now is, and the human runs that part of the process. Yeah. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the AI agent, like a co-pilot or something like that, into this existing process to help the human do this part of the process faster or quick, cheaper.
Yeah.
And I think this is the wrong framing, because I think ultimately what you're doing is you're setting the enterprise up to try and go after like some form of optimization from a speed perspective or an efficiency perspective. And I think if you're literally just trying to take a task and improve it by 5%, or take a process within the organization and make it 10%, 15% more efficient, I think you're just going to find yourself getting left behind so quickly. Yeah. When you have this new like AI native standard of organization that's just going to start popping up left, right, and center.
I think you're right, and I think the way of understanding that is because you can definitely get these huge benefits by giving good tooling and AI tooling to humans. But if your business process assumes free humans,
yeah,
then the expensive bit of that process is the humans. It's not the AI tooling. I think we talked about using ChatGPT's deep research model, and you can just send it off for half an hour to build your report on almost anything. Like this morning, I had it doing research for me on running like particular signing instructions inside a secure enclave in different, like either open source, closed source, cloud, self-hosted environments. And I was like, I just want the full range of options. Go and do it for me. It's done, and it's done. Like I need to, maybe I need another agent now to go through it and read it for me.
Yeah.
But like it's all there and ready for me to implement into stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. Like that's something that would have taken me hours to do, and I would probably do a worse job, frankly. But for $200 a month, I can do this whenever I want, and that is sweet. It's cool. And that's me using a tool to go and get something done. But it's still like, I cost more than that. Like I won't work for somebody for $200 a month.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like not full time, not 24/7. Like so it's always the human is so much more expensive than the tool. And I think if you've got the opportunity to remove the human, like that is where those OpEx components are. It's like, yes, the other alternative is potentially, can you keep as many people and then accelerate the growth of the business? I think you kind of get that for free in doing the human at the edge system anyway.
Yeah, but I think maybe the uncomfortable reality here is that not every person is necessarily skilled or equipped to play that role. They might exist within the enterprise to perform a singular function and do that very well. But if the AI can do that as effectively and at a fraction of the cost, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
And so there's like a way of thinking. It's like not every human is going to be best placed to lead that like next generation of like creative output inside of the organization. And I think that's where that messy transitionary period starts to emerge. But I guess what we're saying here is there's two approaches. If you have a business, there's two approaches you can take here. One is like a very narrow kind of limited approach where you continue to add like AI tools into existing processes, like take customer support. You've probably got a bunch of customer support reps inside the organization, and what you might do is give them like some sort of like language model that can help them draft responses for customers. So maybe that adds like a speed and efficiency element to their existing process. Okay, but they already have a bunch of tools and deterministic software that they probably use on a daily basis, and the risk here is that all you're doing is adding bloat to the number of tools that they're already having to use and interoperate with. And then the other approach that we're kind of articulating is there's more of a kind of first principles transformative approach. And this just means you need to like redesign, re-architect that customer service approach on a like AI native standard. And maybe that just means that you've got a bunch of agents that can handle 90% of your CX inquiries autonomously, which is kind of what Klarna started looking at as well. And they were getting some some productivity benefits out of doing that. And maybe then there's like this knowledge management component that is used to train those agents. So there's probably some sort of 80-20 rule that exists amongst your customer inquiries, where you tend to get the same subset of inquiries over and over again, and those ones can be more easily dealt with by AI. And then the ones that are a little bit more specialized, they go off to a human at the edge. So again, there's this shifting of like human from the center of the process to human at the edge of the process, which is something I think we talked about last week. So I feel like that's the framing that we need. There's like two distinct paths here that we can take. I think the latter path will require a huge amount of conviction and some seriously big balls, because that's just a paradigm shift for a lot of companies.
Agreed.
Excellent. Fierce agreement.
Tom, that was a quick one today.
Well, I mean, I think that maybe we need maybe there's a good historical example here as well. Like I often think about this this like traditional retail to e-commerce, that like transition that happened in the 2010 or 2010 like early 2000s maybe.
I think it was going in the 2000s. It
2000s.
probably picked up in the 2010s with mobile coming along like that. Once everybody had everything on their phone, it just accelerated everything.
Yeah, but you had like the winners in that space weren't necessarily the previous winners, right? You had the incumbents had like bricks and mortar stores they would sell out of, and that like all of their processes were natively oriented around how do we service customers that walk into our store, and the people that we hired.
How do I keep stock on hand? Like how do I
exactly
choose all that? Like how am I forecasting what I need? And all of a sudden, somebody else has an infinite warehouse and they don't have any stock on hand, and it's just delivered as quick.
Exactly. So the analogy here for that kind of narrow approach or that limited approach would be, okay, you are a traditional bricks and mortar retailer, and when the internet came along, all you did was add a website, and you shifted and lifted your online, your catalog from offline to online, and that's all you
like
did.
Maya.
Yeah, exactly. And if you've got enough of a brand, you could probably like see that out long enough for you to make a transition. But if you didn't, you probably don't exist anymore. And I think the other example here is of the kind of a more transformative approach would be something like a Warby Parker that came along. I can't even remember when now. I'd say late.
I feel like I've heard that name, but I can't for the life of me think about what it was.
Warby Parker was like the eyewear company. They came along and they were like, because like, glasses had like a, they had like really, like a lot of intermediary players that existed that would keep like basically adding or taking profit out of this, and they would make the glasses more expensive. And so Warby Parker came along and they were like, okay, well, what we can do is basically create a direct-to-consumer model and online. And what we'll do is we'll facilitate this by enabling customers to basically take home 10 different frames, as many frames as they need to try on themselves at home, and then they ship them back. And that obviously like created like an entirely different like cost structure for the business as well, and they were able to run that natively online, and so this disrupted eyewear pretty significantly. But that required like a first principles approach to this. It's like, actually what we have now is the internet as the native standard for doing business, and so what we're going to do is build the vessel that can take advantage of that.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it?
So maybe we just see like a bunch of new players that emerge that are AI native day one, and the big challenge is for incumbents is like, okay, well, how are you going to play in this like new environment? How do you want to play? Is it enough for you to just consider going after that 10 to 20% marginal improvement? And how long do you survive in that environment? And how long does that take? Dipping your toe in with a pilot here and there to test this stuff. Meanwhile, you've got these AI native new entrants emerging that are just gobbling up market share. And there's a really big question of risk management here for leaders within the enterprise right now. Yeah.
So it reminds me of, we use this analogy a little bit of like doing building a plane in the sky or something like that. And so when I was, back in the day, when I was at Rolls-Royce, I was actually there through EDS as like an outsourcing organization. EDS used to be they bought eventually by HP, but they were huge outfit, like US-based outsourcing. And one of the things I used to do is buy up the Super Bowl commercial sort of slots back in, I guess it would have been early 2000s. And they used to be super proud of all of these commercials. And one of them, and you can find it online, was EDS putting together aeroplanes in the sky. And I remember like they proud, like one of my like grad scheme off-sites that you go to, like they were proudly showing us this advert about how, yeah, this is what we do. We put aeroplanes together in the sky. And like I remember putting my hand up and saying, did nobody stop to think like it's a really bad idea to put aeroplanes together in the sky, and we should just build them on the ground? Like, are you sure this is the message we want to be sending out? And the guy was like, oh no, it just means that we can deal with your businesses in the sky and we can transform it. And I was like, yeah, but I still think like this is super risky. Like, you're better off just setting something down and doing it properly. But yeah. Okay. And it does make me think, like, when I look at this is why I like the Netflix approach that we always talk about is it's very risky to put your aeroplane together in the sky, or to take the wing off while you're already flying or something, and you can disrupt stuff. And I think that ability to just even spin up a second version of your business that you can then use to disrupt yourself. Because again, you still don't know at this point like how seriously to take all this stuff, how quickly it's going to move, and you need to get comfortable with that. So I do think like that, just start natively and just think this through as though you had no existing, use the knowledge that you have of the industry and what needs to be done, but don't assume it has to be done the same way or has to be built around the same sort of roles and people. And just think through from like that first principles view, like, well, what would this process look like if I now had unlimited access to intelligence? Like, when you look at Amazon, like the big trick of Amazon early doors was like, oh, I don't need shelves. Yeah. Like, on the internet, I have unlimited shelf space, and I don't even necessarily need to own the stock. I just need a picture of the thing. So if my stock management is now infinite, what changes? And it's like, well, I may as well sell every book. And then that drove them, they became like the best bookseller in the world, because don't you want to go to the bookshop that always has your book? Yeah. Well, of course you do. Particularly if you've got a particular niche interest in books. It's way easier. They've always got every book, and it's always there for sale, and it can always be got if it's not there. So like, that sounds like an absolutely amazing bookshop, but it's really based off that idea of, okay, with this new paradigm, the thing is we have infinite shelf space. We have infinite store space. I could have a new store for every like, we think about recommendations. Recommendations is like, okay, when you walk into your local bookshop, it's different for everybody that walks in. And it's just all your books that are at the front. Like, that's a way better bookshop. Yeah. It's like, what, so I can go to Dimmicks and now it's just books that I want to read? Well, that's a better Dimmicks, but what about for everyone else? It's like, oh, well, whenever they go in, same thing. They only see their bookshop, and you're like, that sounds like something out of Doctor Who. Yeah. What the fuck? You can't do that. But it turns out you can do that on the internet. And so something that was previously scarce became abundant. And I think the same thing is true here, which is that intelligence, and in particular like little micro points of intelligence, were previously scarce and expensive, and they just became abundant. And so how would you change how your business operates if you had access to way more intelligence than you previously did?
Yeah, what's interesting though is that model didn't emerge out of Dimmicks. It didn't emerge out of one of the incumbents, right? It took a rewiring on the side. It took a new entrant to emerge. And initially people didn't necessarily think that was a good idea. I mean, that's the difficulty here. So like, what are the obstacles then? What are the problems that emerge here that might prevent an organization from really making the most of this? I mean, I think the obvious one, which we've kind of danced around a little bit here, is this like legacy processes, they're completely fragmented. They suffer from like interoperability problems, and they require humans to basically push information through them, like brute force information through them, and that means that the human is still like embedded in this in this process.
I always feel like we have to just take that bit off the table, in the sense that if we assume that there's like a Netflix approach to this, then you're not worried about that.
Yeah, you just let it
you go, right, okay,
deprecate it.
that's how it is.
Yeah.
So then the question would be like, well, what would stop you from doing the better version of this, and like a human at the edge sort of thing? So like, why can't I do this? Like, why isn't everybody doing this right now? What's the problem? I think one is probably understanding. Like, I don't think it's well understood, like, how this plays out at the moment.
Yeah.
And like, I think obviously we talked about this so fucking much. that sounds bad. I have enjoyed talking about this.
Yeah,
so much.
I enjoyed it.
No, but we talked about this a lot over the last, fucking 2 years or so, on this specific subject. And I'm starting to find it hard to understand like where everybody else is at on this one. And I would be like, oh yeah, everybody knows this. And then I will realize that, oh, no, they don't. So hence the podcast, right? It's like, okay, well, let's talk about it out loud so that other people can hear it if they want. So I think there is a point of, it's not immediately obvious that what you've introduced into the world is like tons more intelligence. It sort of is, but right now I think it looks more like a tool that you would use, as opposed to like, oh, this is just like almost a different like thing that I can micro hire to do a job. I just need to better understand my job. Then I think you've got intent.
Yeah.
It's probably the next thing that's a little bit scarce out there. It's like, well, once I know that that's possible, like, do I have like enough intent to do this? Like, can I go and do this to my business? And like, what's required to make that call and invest in it? And that's probably possible. Like, once if you can convince yourself of the benefits, it becomes like, oh shit, I should absolutely do this. And we've seen that with a few different people, right? Like, they go, okay, we're in, we're ready, let's go. But then you've got time and money. Because it's not free to invent an entire second stream of the business. Right, and it's not that you necessarily have to go and start a new business, or you have to do like a JV, or you have to do some particular setup. Even when we talk about the Netflix model, it's really about like, look, you need something that's segregated enough from your current operations that you're not assuming everything works like that. And then you need to invest like time and money into that to grow that. That I think is probably a bit of a stumbling block still. It's not obvious until you've seen many cases of other people doing it that that's the correct course of action.
Yeah, but it also depends on like, what is the motivation, what are the set of incentives that exist within the organization, how big is the organization? Because you could be sitting in like a middle management position and go, well, that's not my job. Yeah. How often do you hear that, right? And so a lot of people will go, well,
very Australian.
What I will do instead is, again, go back to this like tool layer and just go, I will just give my people ChatGPT Pro accounts so that they can do their job like 5% faster, 10% faster, whatever it happens to be. And then that's enough. I've done my job. It's not my job to rethink everything within the enterprise. And this is where I think part of this...
I think this is particularly an enterprise problem.
Yes.
Which I wasn't really thinking about it from that point. But
even larger small businesses are similarly bureaucratic, right?
But like, and also which middle manager is trying to reduce the size of their team?
Yep.
Like, it's the size of your team and your budget is really about your power inside the organization. And in generally, the people that favor playing a lot of organizational power games are the people that get into these positions.
Yep.
So it's not a very natural incentive for that person to say, all right, well, I'm going to reduce the amount of people and control I have in the organization for the good of the company. That's just not aligned with their own personal incentives. So I think, again, that is unlikely in that state. And another one would be time, like, right? So who's got tons of time?
Yeah, exactly.
To dedicate to this sort of thing? Like, if you're running a small business and you happen to be resource constrained, which many are because the next marginal hire is so expensive. Yeah. Like, how do you have time to sit down and plan out like a second version of all my processes that already work? Fuck you. Yeah. Like, why would I do that? Like,
it's been hard enough getting this version out.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, so you want me to do something like with no guarantee of success?
Yeah.
You think like, it's who's got time for that? Like, the world is full of people that barely have time to think for themselves, never mind anything else. Like, it's...
Yeah, and to link this back to the original kind of premise of this chat around AGI, I also think at some level people use this notion that there is improvement coming. There's
So I
a
just
greater
wait.
model, so I'll wait it out, and you've got this like psychologically enabled inertia, which they can use as a crutch or a shield because they're like, hey, the technology isn't good enough to do all of the things I need it to
it's
do
crap.
yet, so I'm going to wait.
It's
I'm not
stupid.
gonna
It
do
doesn't know a
anything.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, framing your need to automate now as being dependent on some future super intelligent is, I guess, the mistake that we're trying to highlight here. You can actually do pretty much everything you need to do right now.
Exactly, and it only really matters if you want to still be in business in 10 years. So if you don't,
Yeah,
it's
it
fine.
doesn't
Don't worry
matter
about it.
much,
Don't worry
does
about it, guys. Just wait. Just wait for the super intelligent.
I mean,
And
if that
so-
doesn't get you motivated, I don't know what does.
Well, I don't know. It's a bit clickbaity to say that. So we should definitely make
We
that
will
some
say it.
sort of
Yeah.
thumbnail.
There's going to be a YouTube short with that on there.
Maybe I'll try and riff on it now. See if we can get a YouTube shot. out of
Yeah,
this.
go on.
So I think the real risk you have is like, am I going to be in business in 10 years' time? And it can come down to like who automates first and gains that pricing control inside the market and at what level of cost. So if you're sat around waiting for AGI and AGI takes 10 years, and right now I can take, even if I'm starting from scratch, if I could take 80% of the cost out of a particular business line that you do, I will crush you in the market in that time. If AGI comes along next year and you can just say, do this job, then grand.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay. But my point is that I think that there is a disconnect. I think that what we have right now is the ability to take huge amounts of cost out of a business and drive tremendous value. And whoever does that will win their particular industries. And anybody else that's just waiting for a new improvement is going to lose.
Yes.
Because they won't take effective action now.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, cut it. YouTube short.
That's going to be the short right there. That's brilliant.
Can we talk to CapCut or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Hey, CapCut, cut that.
We should just have like some sort of MCP just running in the background going, let's automatically turn these into YouTube shorts
Alright,
and
well,
post
add
them
that
in
later.
real time. But you know what? Yeah, so I mean, there's a bunch of things here. One of them is psychological. There's probably a bunch of change management issues as well that you get within companies, especially as you start adding layers of middle management in.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to be part of a consultation process, and it just gets messy. And then you find
How do you feel
that-
about governance?
Yeah, well, there's a whole chat around governance, right? I mean, you just
Yeah,
get
no
more
doubt.
and more layers of resistance that tend to emerge, and all of these things act as an anchor on your ability to go and transform this business into the state it needs to be in order to survive, in order to still be around in 10 years. Then there's like I think these mental models that are really practical as well for people if you're running a business. It's like, how do I think about all of this stuff? Like I've never had to think about like completely redesigning an organization before, even if it's just a small business. It's just, I went and started a small business because I knew I could do it better and faster or more efficiently than the other guys that were doing it.
Yeah.
That was often the animus for starting, or I just wanted to be my own boss. I didn't want to work for anyone anymore, and that was the motivation. And so there is like almost this mental model that you need to embrace in order to start to think about what should the business look like? How should I be trying to rewire this stuff? Like what needs to survive? What doesn't need to survive? I wonder if there's like, it's kind of this like surfer's mind analogy as well to all of this. I don't know.
All right,
It's like,
hit me with it.
well, like the surfer is inherently trying to master a complex system, right? The wave is a complex system. You're inherently, I'm just like going off cuff on this one, right? But you do a lot of sitting and waiting and watching. There are a bunch of feedback loops while you're out there monitoring what the wave is going to do. No two waves are the same, but there might be patterns. There's a rhythm to it, and you need to be able to read that and start predicting where you need to position yourself in order to capture that wave. And then there's just an element of like riding it as well. And so maybe there is like this weird parallel here where you've got to be, the mental model shift is you've got to actually turn toward being better at absorbing like all of this like environmental feedback that's around you. And, that's just like all of the new technology and the use cases that are emerging. and then figuring out like, okay, how do I navigate it? How do I position myself, the business, to be in the right position when the crest of the wave emerges so that I can best ride that wave. And do so, you know, within this like constantly changing like business context, right? No two businesses are the same, no two business leaders are necessarily the same. How you might approach your own plot, like how you might plot your own path to being able to best ride that wave might be different based on your own like set of experiences, like, and that's the same for a surfer, right? Like the more experience they've got in plotting, you know, the path to the peak of the wave so they can ride it is going to be different. They might be more ambitious, they might be more ballsy, they might be more conservative. And I wonder if like the people who are like best able to go and exploit this are like, I don't know, they have like the ability to adapt. There's like a willingness to be adaptable and malleable rather than we need a rigid playbook.
So, two things. Like one, hashtag learn to surf. So it's like I like. We can replace learn to code because that's dead.
Can we get a surfer in our? I'm going to add a surfer.
Okay, yeah, add a surfer in the background.
In the background, the video.
Okay, 8-bit surfer. So that's cool. I think to like labour that analogy a little bit, like I think there is something about this where, you know, like if you're like, I'm not a surfer.
Neither.
Weird. All right, well, let's just talk out of school.
Yeah.
We don't know, that's fine. Like, it's nothing new. But let's say I'm out in the ocean. Like, one of the things that I am aware of from like surf life saving stuff with the kids and all that is like the ocean is like way more powerful than you. And I think there's something true about this with like what's about to happen here with the technology shift that you're looking at is that like it's you need to adapt to it. It's not going to bother adapting to you.
Exactly.
Like, it's like you can be the EU and you can try and regulate it out of existence or whatever, but like frankly we're just going to make everything way cheaper. People love cheaper stuff. You're going to dominate markets. You're not going to be able to get your hands around this in a regulatory way that retains like all the same jobs that we've got now, and probably neither should you, because we should make everything in the world cheaper and it would be good. But you are going to have to adjust to that. And so that is like this big wave that suddenly just popped up behind you and you're like, shit.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here it comes. I can see it building. I'm in the strike zone for this. I either need to find a way to just get out of the way, get dumped, or ride this.
Yeah.
But it isn't going to shift. It is coming. It is a wave. You need to learn to surf. That would be an excellent like name for a little training course.
Yeah.
We should do that.
Yeah. And I wonder also where this notion of agency fits into all of this as well. Like I think the real beneficiaries of the next like 5 years to 10 years will be people who are just naturally high agency. Like I feel like the challenge most people within, especially mid to larger sized organizations, is going to be you've not had to be high agency to succeed in these organizations. You've just needed to functionally be like very good at doing the thing that you were brought in to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've talked about this in the past. Like the reason I find this so exciting is because I sit back and look at it through an entrepreneurial lens, and I think about all of the things that we could build and create. You don't necessarily think about the downside because naturally wired to be a little bit more optimistic as entrepreneurs. But yeah, I feel like you need to. Well, I almost feel like agency is going to be the new IQ. Like that's the standard for opportunity, like harvesting opportunity, but also like it might also be the source of great inequality in the future as well. And I think the best people, or the way you could best position yourself for this now, both at an individual level, but also within organizations, is to just embrace this like highly general toolkit. You know, you want to be able to think on your feet. You want to be able to pivot quickly. And I feel like, and you need to know what to learn as well. And I feel like this is almost where the analogy to surfing really comes in, because that's where this kind of framing of adaptability is super important. because you don't now just have this like rigid set of rules to follow, this deterministic playbook that has basically empowered you to do your job function for years and years and years, and you built up this domain expertise doing that thing, and that's given you both, you know, status and title and money. And now it's like, oh, actually what you need to be is really malleable and really adaptable, and you need to just have this broad canvas of skills in order to go and take advantage of this technology.
Well, and again, like we talk about time and space, and like how do you do this? Do you do it in your main business? Do you do it in a side bit? Like there is an element here where you need to make space for agency and learning these skills, right?
Yeah.
So to torture the analogy for surfing a lot more, like, and I'm staring at the ocean. It's like, I mean, there's no waves out there today, but like you don't. Let's say off the coast of Portugal, there's like a famously massive wave.
Nazare.
Okay. So that wave, like if it's my like long-term goal in life to ride that wave, because I'm insane,
Yes.
then like I don't learn to do it by sitting on the beach, not being in the water
And watching,
right? Like I need to make space to learn, and I need to expose myself to these things to then understand like the different ways that they can impact, and then how I can use them in my business. So like, you know, putting your head in the ground and like not getting used to these tools, not using them in your day-to-day life. Like, I mean, although we might shit on the bionic employee model a little bit, of just like, it's not where the main value is, but it is definitely the way in to understanding how to use these tools is to use them. Don't sit back and intellectualize it. Don't sit on the beach thinking about how you're going to surf this massive wave and how it's going to be brilliant and have all the theoreticals in place. Go use the things, start using them inside your business, see where they work correctly and they don't, and then get advice from people that can help you with how they can work in different ways or how you would build these processes from scratch. But you've got to get in the wave, right? And learn to surf. Don't do this from the beach. Like, you will not intellectualize your way to surfing Nazare. Yeah, you need to be in there and you need to be learning.
This is where the challenge lies for these businesses, though, because the reason most like software in the past has been deterministic is because it needs to be, because you're trying to manage out all of the risk, all of the downsides that might occur from bolting in like a piece of technology into a process that people are using inside of the company. So yeah, this is where you just need to keep doing the reps and be able to experiment and learn on the fly and adapt, and that feels like quite a paradigm shift for a lot of these companies.
And as I said, who's got the time?
Who's
Like,
got
to
the
me,
time,
that's
yeah.
the big. I mean, maybe this is where the like bionic employee approach comes in. Is like, look, make yourself some time. Like, you can be more effective in your job as it exists right now by using tools that accelerate your ability to do the work. But don't wait there, because if you don't think about how you could run the entire process without people in the loop, then you've still got the most expensive part of the process in the business. But definitely give yourself some headroom, and then once you get the headroom, like, that's the point at which you can start exploring this space. And then I feel like I need to try and tie it back some way to Billy Big models now, because we're definitely calling it that because we've said it, said it too many times. So it's important to give yourself constraints like this in creative endeavors. But I think the point is that none of what we're saying for how you would go and get the benefits from this requires us to have some sort of breakthrough into a new paradigm of way more complex model. And so all of these benefits are on the table right now. They just require agency and intent and time and money, which is great news. I think the other thing, this is maybe off in a tangent now, but like, the other thing that's important to recognize here is that if we look at the breakthroughs that have actually made a big difference in the last year, they weren't necessarily bigger models. Like, there's two key things came in that made a huge difference. One was reasoning models, which use a kind of chain of thought of like effectively almost like sub prompts to then come back with an answer. The other one was what would you say, like maybe like a deep research tool, which again is the same sort of technique. And then, yeah, so let's focus on those two as a start. And like, well, what are these things doing? Well, the reasoning model is really saying, I would always describe AI models as like the over-exuberant confidence of a 10-year-old that like knows how to answer something, knows maybe vaguely like what the answer would be, but when they don't, they just go, oh, it's this. And like, I would catch my son doing this every now and again, and he'll tell me something, and he'll be like, oh, that's 200,000, and it's like, what have you based that number on? And he's like, oh, I don't know, it just felt right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. And it's like, it was delivered with the confidence of like, of any bit of an LLM just lying to you about something. And this, we just refer to it as hallucinations, and soon it can go away and stuff. But you got to think about what a language model does is it takes in like the literal language that you have and then predicts what the answer might be based on a bunch of maths that is an accumulation of how people respond to stuff on the internet.
Yeah.
And so it really is like the model just takes your question and then just answers it. And really what's going on in a reasoning model is we say, instead of just answering me like you're down the pub and you're 10 pints in and I've asked you a question and you just fire your answer back out at me, why don't you think about it?
Yeah.
And so what's happened in like the system prompt of a reasoning model is it says, all right, here's the question. Think about how you might answer that. And it goes, well, to think about what I might do to answer that is I might do this, and I might do that, and I might do this, and I'd think about it like that. And so my answer would be this.
Yeah.
And this is why they're slower, is because they don't run one like LLM completion, which would be the kind of standard terminology in the industry for what's going on behind the desk, which is I give you an input, you complete it. That's the completion. But for the reasoning model, it kind of goes like, here's the input. All right, now I'm going to do 10 completions, the final one of which is the answer that I give you back.
Yeah.
And it's because it's planned out what it was going to say beforehand. And then you can chain those together. So it's like the chain of thought model. It's like, okay, well, come up with a plan, go through the plan, now summarize it as the output. And you actually get remarkably better responses doing that. And so what they've done is then they've built that as like a system. And you could have done this, again, a year ago. I built some systems like this where I say, look, instead of just answering me, here's the question, give me a plan. Now take your plan and do each of those steps, and then give me each of the answers, and then I will take the original question, and then give me an answer based on those things. And you can do quite remarkable stuff. And then the deep research is really taking that model, but instead of it being just like the LLM asking itself questions to plan out an answer, it's also brought in tools. And so it would say, and it would do, not necessarily execute every step in the plan, but it would adjust the plan as it goes. And so what happens is you would give it a goal and say, oh, I want you to do like some research on this thing. And its system prompt is effectively going, like you'll see it in ChatGPT. The first thing it does, it goes, all right, here's 5 to 10 clarifying questions to make sure I understand you better. And then it goes into the actual flow. And the flow would be, right, well, plan out what are the 10 steps that you would do. And it gives you like a steps. And you go, all right, well, that's our current plan. All right, now go do step 1. And it goes and does step 1. And step 1 might have been had a bunch of tools. And it'd be like, all right, I'm going to go and look at this website. I'm going to do a web search. And it's like, okay, right, we get the web search back. All right, well, what would you do next given this web search? Have you done step 1? It goes, no, I'd have to read the website. It goes and reads the website and comes back. And all this is like 100 to 1,000 LLM calls that are going on, where every one of the calls is really saying like, well, what's the plan? Like, what's the objective you're trying to do? Have you met that objective? Yes, no. It's just, that's back in the structured language sort of space that we talked about earlier. And then some of them are actually just reading websites and summarizing them. So you effectively have like hundreds of these like little agents out there reading websites, summarizing websites, checking in on the other agent that summarized the website, see if it's actually met the plan yet. And then as it like comes down from this like first step of the plan, which is to go and read this particular GitHub thing and come back with a summary, you get the summary and it goes, all right, now my next sort of 8 steps of the plan were, this, and this. Does that plan still hold given what I found out from step one? And it goes like, yes, no. And it'll either redo the plan or keep the plan. And then you go into the next step of the plan and you carry on. And this is why these things run for like half an hour. Is that they're just planning and replanning to like meet a goal as you go, using input that it gets along the way. And again, like I built versions of this like 9 months ago, right? When we were doing our market research part, this is what it did, is that it went, all right, let's like, who are you wanting some information on? Right, I'll go and look for information on that person. Like, okay, well, here's how I would do it. I'd go, who's in the management team? What are the names of the management team? Okay, get the management team from like a web research search. Okay, pull that back in. I go, who are the people in the okay, well, now go research them and go look at their LinkedIn and stuff. It would be, this is all, but this has been there since Llama. I literally built, that's what I'm saying. I built it on Llama free using the Grok like API backend because it was just quick, quick and cheap compared to everything else for testing.
What's really fascinating about what you've just described as well is it mirrors how a team of people might actually approach the same goal. You know, and I think this is where multi-agent architecture is really fascinating because all of a sudden it's thinking about how to approach moving toward that goal in a similar way to a human, and what we're not doing is going, hey, here's like a big elongated process. What we're going to do is give it to one human to do. We would never do that in an organization because it's just too much for one person to do. There's a lot of context switching, and you know, maybe it's better if you're writing a piece of content that someone else actually does a review of it and does some sort of like critique that gives
Hemingway,
you feedback.
Write drunk, edit sober.
Edit sober, yeah, exactly. And so like this, having multiple agents take on multiple roles in this context is what's really really valuable here.
Which is interesting because you hear it in my comments, but I definitely have this sort of love-hate relationship with talking about agents like people. In the sense that, like, in one way, you definitely do have to do that because it's how we think about everything in the business is always through the lens of people, because that's the only way we've ever had to apply intelligence. So it's correct to think about it like that. It's like, well, what would a person do in this instance? And it's like, but instead of it being like, all right, well, it's one person that's got, you know, a particular level of skill and intelligence and background and education and all this sort of stuff. It's like you've got to think about it like it could be almost anybody, and they could be an idiot at absolutely everything except this one thing where they're a savant. And so it's like you've got to have these like, you've got to in some way put your mind into like, well, how would I do this if I had 100,000 idiot savants that can only ever do one thing well? And then you build the savants that you need to do the process. But yeah, like that's like literally like the same person, like the same agents. And I mean, really, an agent is a set of system prompts and tools. Like we say agent because it sounds like James Bond, so that's cool, right? Like this is like clearly agent sounds better than like workflow or program or bot or something like that. They all sound shit. Agent, he's gonna shoot you with a Walter PPK.
That's it.
You know, like he's cool. He drinks martinis. Like who doesn't want your workforce full of agents? That sounds amazing. You know. But really all it's doing is like, all right, well, every one of those is a set of system prompts, a set of context, and a set of tools. And the tools will be things like they can talk to an API. Like none of this stuff is cool. James Bond very rarely solved a problem with an API. That's one thing I noticed.
But he did tend to work alone in isolation, albeit within like a greater framework of other people doing other things that helped him or enabled him to do that thing very well.
Okay.
Just to extend the analogy further.
He was good at like
pulling the trigger.
He was good at shooting a gun and fucking girls.
You know, but as they often allude to in Bond, it's like you need to know when to pull the trigger.
And when to fuck the gun. Both seem to work out for him at various times, right? He would get information or protection from either.
I feel like Bond doesn't think too much on either, to be honest.
Well, it's kind of innate talent. I guess.
So maybe we like just do a little like round up here, because I know we've been going like a decent amount of time, but like, so we started off with this question of like, you know, Billy big models. Do we actually need bigger and better models to go and cut costs within an organization by 90%?
Yep.
All right. So what we're saying is our thesis is here that the existing level that models are at today, and probably have been at for at least a year, are more than adequate to achieve that and to basically enable like pretty widespread automation within like most of these companies.
Yeah.
And that we're not actually reliant on some form of like advanced super intelligence to come along and do that for us in the future. And so we really should be looking at this now.
Yeah. And I think you'd say that anything new that comes along will make it marginally better and marginally cheaper.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and I think maybe what we, like, it's interesting framing. We've had this discussion, and then the thing that I'm thinking about most is like maybe what we need here is like a better mental model or a better way to think about how to build these processes or these businesses on this AI native standard more than we need to actually consider more advanced models.
Mm-hmm.
Like the question should be, how do we do this now?
Yeah.
And how should we think about it? How do we go about doing it? How do we be proactive? How are we like being high agency to go and take advantage of what's there before everybody else take the leap?
Yeah, you review episode 4, the intelligent assembly line.
That's right.
Card in the top left.
Is it?
I don't know. Like, it depends on who edits this.
I guess we have to do
nobody
that.
edits it. So.
That's true. There's no editing.
There's no card in the top left. Like, so that's a shame.
I mean, I think that's a pretty good riff for today, don't you?
All right. Cool.
Let's call it
All
episode
right,
5.
that's the good stuff.
In the bag.